Have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Opposed is nay. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, we're going to get started with ordinances first reading. Let's go with 5A, please.
An ordinance to amend the charter of the City of Chattanooga and all acts, ordinances, and other charter provisions amendatory thereof pursuant to the provisions of Article 11, Section 9 of the Constitution of the State of Tennessee, Home Rule Amendment, so as to change the city charter by amending Title 4, Chapter 1, related to city court by deleting sections 4.1 through 4.9 and substituting in lieu thereof sections 4.1 through 4.3.
All right. Councilman Byrd.
We had some discussion in strategic planning. I was wondering if, Mr. Field, you can give us an overview of what this reads and what this is going to actually be saying?
Yes, sir. This provision is dealing with sections of the charter which have been there in effect since 1901 in the city charter. Several of the provisions at that point in time provided for General Sessions Court jurisdiction for the Chattanooga City Court, and it being a court of record, and it had the powers for cases to go to the criminal court on appeal here in Hamilton County instead of the civil courts. We have provided that those sections that were dealing with the criminal court jurisdiction of city court would go away. There are provisions in here about justices of the peace. There are provisions about the city workhouse and the city-county workhouse in the charter that we thought were archaic at this point in time. And we simply took out what was 4.1 through 4.9 of the charter and inserted 4.1 through 4.3 that talks about the jurisdiction of the city court handling municipal ordinance violations, and then those appeals of any municipal ordinance violations would go to the civil court of appeals from that point on. We put in provisions here about the cost of being set by ordinance in the code, and that the provisions that the judge and the clerk of the city court could administer oaths. And we kept those sections, and we took out the older archaic provisions. Okay. And that's what A is. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good, Councilman. Well, that might have cleared everything up on that item. Any other lights? Any other questions? Phil, did you get the other language in there to set the fee by ordinance?
And that is what Melinda has already, is in the process of making that change for this evening. There was some concern about there was a provision in the original charter. Put my speaker back on. There was a provision in section 4.2 that had the sum of $5 shall be added as court costs that would go for the fire and policeman's pension fund. And that provision has not been changed since 1969. It was put in the code in 69. There was a request during the meeting this afternoon to just establish that it could be set by ordinance, and that there could be a provision that would establish that amount that would go to the fire and police pension fund by ordinance, and it would not have the $5 amount. And there had been some recommendation by Daisy Madison to go up to a $10 amount, but they thought it would be more flexible to just put the council could establish that by the budget ordinance each year.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Gilbert.
Just to make sure, A is not dealing with the salary part of the judges.
No, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Not at all.
All right, Madam Clerk, B, please.
An ordinance to amend the charter of the City of Chattanooga and all acts, ordinances, and other charter provisions amendatory thereof pursuant to the provisions of Article 11, Section 9 of the Constitution of the State of Tennessee, Home Rule Amendment, so as to change the city charter by amending the city court provisions in the interest of public policy and to generally improve the charter.
Councilman Byrd.
Thank you, Chair. I would definitely want to hear understanding and clear that up for us, so for people here. And if it's okay, Chair, I'd like to recognize Judge Bean and Judge Patey and the court clerk, Ron Swafford, here today. Thank you guys for being here. We really, really appreciate your your presence. And could you please clear that up and let us know an understanding of that?
Fill specifically what we're removing and then adding back in.
Okay. And in the interim, I was on vacation last week. I came back, and I think we have two versions, and we were trying to make sure we had input to make sure that these would work the best in the interest of the court. But the top version that says an ordinance to amend the charter is the same one that was at least reviewed last week. It simply made provisions, sections 4.27 and 4.28 in Chapter 2 of Title 4 of the Charter to be removed, and did not provide for any insertion of any other items in there. 4.27 is the section that says that the city court was divided into two divisions, and a first division and a second division were created, and the present city judge would provide over the first division of court. That section was added in 1969 to the city charter and has been in effect in the charter for two divisions since that occurred. Section 4.28 is the section that says that the judge of the second division would possess the same powers and jurisdiction as are possessed by the city court and the city judge, and would receive such compensation as the council will provide by ordinance. The initial ordinance that is on your agenda for this evening at the top just simply takes those two sections out of the charter, or would give the electorate the option to be able to vote on those two issues to go out of the charter. Whenever I got back into town here this week, I thought that maybe you might want to have some provision that would provide for what would happen if there was only one division of the court, and what powers that the judge would have under those circumstances. I also put an effective date as of May of 2022, so that if someone was running for the position, they would know that there would be one division as of May of 2022, so there would not be confusion in that regard. And then I put in provisions that the judge would have the compensation as the city council would provide by ordinance. So that's the only difference between the two documents. One has a replacement of a new section 427. The first one just simply deletes both those sections and leaves that blank.
All right. Councilman?
I'll yield for a second to anybody else that have anything else to say. To anyone
Got
else.
a loose one. Hang on just a moment. Councilman Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since we do have our two city court judges here this afternoon, I was wondering if either one of them has anything that they would like to add or discuss about any of these provisions.
Please. Just come up to the mic.
Thank you, council
afternoon.
members. I just had a couple of questions. Really, I was here to see, I'd gotten the two versions that Mr. Noblet had mentioned, and wasn't clear which way you were going, so I really just wanted to hear any discussion. I would just interject here that if you're considering deleting the language with regard to having a second division, I don't know if you might want to consider leaving a provision that the council could have a second division if necessary, because again, this is 4 years from now that we're talking about possibly making a change, and we don't know what it might be like 4 years from now. The police department now is utilizing electronic handheld units that, is my understanding, all of the officers will eventually have these units, and I don't know how much the city has spent on these units, but I'm sure it's a lot of money. It started out slow because obviously they didn't have that many units. They started out with maybe 5 to 10 units. Those officers were trained, and then they started training other officers as they were getting these units in. And as I said, it's my understanding eventually all the officers will be utilizing these units, which could result in a substantial increase in the tickets that are issued when all of the officers are using these. We're the only court right now that is utilizing electronic ticketing. Sessions Court is not, criminal court is not. So all of the tickets that are being electronically filed are coming into city court. So I would just mention that as a possibility that the tickets, the fluctuation in the tickets could change, and it could be increased over the next 4 years. But again, you know, that's just speculation. We don't know. But the only thing I would mention is the possibility of having a second division if one is necessary in 4 years. And the council would make the determination based on ticket numbers, probably the budget issues and so forth, if it's necessary in 4 years, but giving you the option to have a second division if it's warranted at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Beatty. Hold on just one moment in case
Okay.
there's a question for you.
Mhm.
Council Anderson, you're still active. Are you good? Councilwoman Burrs.
I agree with that. We talked about that earlier today, and I fully agree with what you're saying. The fact that we should always have the option. The comments were, or at least my comments were, we need to be nimble enough to raise court cost fees, that's not the kind of stuff you want in a charter. You want it to breathe with the times. So I'm fully agreeing with what you're saying and want to give you more freedom to deal with fees and stuff as it needs to happen. So thank you very much for your comments.
Okay.
Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you. I was just going to agree with Judge Patty on what she said about that.
Is your mic on?
It's on. Oh, let me find out y'all got me turned down low. But I wanted to agree with you on that because we have no idea what's going to happen in 4 years. Only thing we can say what will happen is during city council elections that seats will turn or people will still be there. We can say that for certain. But we have no idea what's going to happen when it comes to our city court. But do you have any idea about how many cases that you hear in city court?
I used to know, I couldn't tell you right now, maybe Mr. Swafford could speak to that, but when I first came up there, we had, I would say 500 to 1,000 cases a week just on the morning docket, which I have. I would say we noticed probably a decline in tickets, honestly, when Chief Fletcher was here, because his priority was in focusing on other issues and not so much in writing tickets. And so that's probably when we really started to see a decline. I think there has been a little bit of an increase since Chief Roddy's been in as chief. And again, I think with the electronic ticketing, it's too early to know how that's going to play out. But I would anticipate if the city spent the money to have one of these units with every officer, that they would expect that they'll be issuing tickets with them. So again, that's just speculation, but I can't say right now. I get the first and third shift officers, so my docket is always a little bit more than the afternoon, just because I get both sets of officers for first and third shift. So, I would say it's still at least 500 a week, sometimes more. But I also hear the environmental and the animal docket, so those account for a lot of cases as well that Judge Bean would not have. So our dockets are a little bit different, and that's why the numbers are going to be a little bit different.
You good? Judge Bean, did you have something to add?
I wanted to make a couple of comments.
Thank you.
Yes, thank y'all
Thank you,
for
Judge
having us
Beatty.
here. This is probably good timing because I planned, and I've told Mayor Burke before, that I plan on retiring after this term, which would, at that time, what would have been on the bench for 22 years, so I think that's probably enough. I started when I was 59, so y'all can figure the math there if you want to. But I will say this, when I first started, right before I started, Judge Taylor had retired, and the docket was backed up with one judge. And that's why they added the second division back in 2000. And when I started, I stayed in court till probably 12 o'clock at night. And as time has evolved, it's gone down. And then when the parking was lost, which was a big aspect, and actually probably made, I guess, a couple $1 million a year, I don't know. But anyway, when it was turned over to CARTA, that part went down. And then, as Judge Patey said, Chief Fletcher had the idea of more inner-city type work and not as much on the traffic, so it went down more at that time. But I think you all are on the right track about just having a second division when you need. You could even have it that you could have it where you appoint a second division and not have an election. Some city ordinances have where one can be elected, she can be elected, and then the other one could be appointed. and you could appoint them in the afternoon for 2 or 3 days a week if you had to, because I do still stay busy with traffic. The one thing Judge Payne said, they alter the shifts on all the accidents that we get, and then I do get some first and third shift if it's an alternate time, and now it's the system that sets those things. But at any rate, I think that I think y'all are on the right track with it. I really do, and I think the questions were right and proper. I know that you look at it to save money, and as long as we keep looking at it that way rather than to try to make money, we're all right, because the purpose of the court is not to make money. The purpose of our court is for justice. Okay.
Thank you, Judge Bean. No lights.
Is that it?
Thank you, sir, very much.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it.
One other comment, if I could. I think Phil Noblet would make a great city attorney.
He has been since I've been here. Hold on, Judge Bean, hold just a moment. Councilman Byrd, did you have something you wanted to add?
Judge Bean, thank you so much. I appreciate what you just said. The purpose of the court is for justice, not to make money. And several constituents talked to me about that. And one of the things that the constituents feel that officers have to make a quota. They got to get their quota in. That's why they gave me this ticket. They have to reach this quota. And I tell a lot of constituents is that, no, we're not trying to just bombard people with tickets and make this place make so much money so it can be funded, but we do have to have checks and balances. So I do understand that. And so the elephant in the room basically is that $2.5 million, so to say, is being spent of the constituents' money, and you want to make sure that we're spending it in the proper way. And so that's where the battle comes in. What's the right thing to do? And Judge Bean, we have had several conversations, and thank you for having been an open book to me to try to understand how we can fix this situation. I know a lot of people were saying they're going to retire, like you talked to me about, but some of the people that work in clerk's office, Ron Swaffer's office, were expecting this, and they were going to retire. But the issue that I had was that I didn't want a lot of those young ladies and men to lose their jobs, because I know these people work hard, and I know these people are in amazing situations, has families, and they're struggling already. So I was battling with that situation, trying to figure out how do we make this balance right for everyone? How do we assure that our city workers and the people that are working in these clerk's office are keeping their job? And Judge Patey, you're not overworked, and if you decide to run again, you're not overloaded with so much work. So I think that right there was becoming was becoming an issue. So perception over reality is that the perception is that we're trying to shut down city court and just dissolve it altogether. And that's not the reality. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure that we save and, take care of our taxpayers and make sure that if we're spending the $2 million and getting the most bang for our buck. And I just appreciate you coming here today to clear some things up. I talked to the young officer over there, and he cleared some things up for us when it comes to the e-citations and writing tickets and how they write stuff for city court and county court. So it's some work that has to be done. I just want to say thank you guys for coming, and I appreciate your honesty. Thank you.
Councilwoman Burrs.
For being here. You reiterated some of the things that were said in our 1:30 meeting. You're both doing a great job, and I appreciate your straightforwardness and bringing up stuff. And you were unrehearsed, right? So thank you very much for saying again what we said earlier. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councilwoman. Madam Clerk, we're going to move on, but Judge Bean, Judge Patey, Mr. Swafford, thank you very much for coming in today.
One other thing I wanted to mention, if you have one clerk, then right now you have two court administrators and two sets of court officers. If you have one, that will alleviate that against two.
Thank you all very much. Let's move on to C, please. Actually, hold on just one moment. Let's see, C. Councilman Mitchell, we went over transportation and public works last week, correct?
That's right, Mr. Chair.
All right. Unless there are questions from the council on those items. We're going to skip along, and we will move down to resolutions under economic and community development. Let's read 7A, please.
A resolution declaring surplus of property located at 1001 Lindsay Street, tax map number 145DX005, and authorizing the transfer of the parcel to the Chattanooga Downtown Redevelopment Corporation with the continuation of maintenance, janitorial, and related services as provided by employees of the city of Chattanooga for a period not to exceed 9 months.
All right, thank you. And just to note, 7A, B, and C are all related. There's 3 different parcels that we're discussing. And with that, Councilman Oglesby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On all 3 items, I would like to request a deferral for 2 weeks to be heard on August the 14th.
All right, and that is something you're prepared to make this evening, sir?
Yeah, I will be prepared to make that tonight at our 6 o'clock meeting.
All right, thank you, sir. Councilman Gilbert.
I know we are trying to sell these buildings, but is there any, do they have a cost factor for us, what we're looking at if we do sell them, the percentages we're going to get from this? Is that?
I believe that's part of the information that the administration was pulling together and the conversations that we had about deferring it, just to make sure that they could get it all together for us.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, sir. That was my understanding, Councilman. Is that yours as well? Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. Well, with that then, let's move on to D, please.
A resolution authorizing the Chief Information Officer to execute a blanket contract with Carasoft Technology Corporation as providers of Acela software, licensing, technology support, and professional services citywide for a period of 1 year, with the option to renew for 2 additional years, beginning May 24th, 2018 through May 23rd, 2019, for an amount not to exceed $199,718.68.
All right. Seeing no questions? Oh, I do have one. Councilman Gilbert.
3 questions. I know it says option. Do that option comes back to us if we get renewed again?
I do believe so. Yeah, it will
Correct.
come back up.
Thanks.
E, please.
A resolution authorizing and directing the clerk for the council to advertise for public hearing on August 14th, 2018, the de-annexation of certain tracts adjacent to the current city limits, which are located at 6403 and 6403B Middle Valley Road within the city of Chattanooga in Hamilton County, Tennessee.
All right. And F, we covered last week. I've not heard anything further on that.
Well, we did, Mr. Chair, but
I'm
I've
sorry.
actually received a couple of phone calls on this. Can Mr. Bailey come up?
I would love to hear from Mr. Bailey this afternoon.
The phone calls, both of them, the same question, of course, 60 North Market Street, I guess that's the old Nautilus building.
Yes, sir.
They were asking what a projecting sign is.
Projecting sign, I believe this sign is actually already up. But the projecting sign, it would need this temp use permit to stay up. The projecting sign is, if you have a wall face, the projecting sign just attaches to it and projects out into the right of way.
Okay, all right. Now I can answer their question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Good, Councilman. All right, that, ladies and gentlemen, is the last item on our agenda for this afternoon. Is there anything further from the council? If not, we are adjourned till 6.